budget has been delayed given the partial government shutdown we saw for almost 45 days. And as a result, the White House Budget Office said we need more time. It didn't change anything for the Pentagon. There are fundamental details of the request, except that what we may see different as a result of the shutdown and delayed budget is there may be some border wall money that comes over as part of the defense budget this time. It's a lot of money. Since President Trump took office and he left open Obama's last budget in 2017, he's added significantly more defense dollars. It's wildly over the spending caps, which are the legal limit, but that's kind of what we expected. So he's spending more than the last president on defense slightly, but not much has changed under that in terms of where he's investing. But in terms of what the Pentagon's defense strategy is, which is to rebalance competition against China and Russia, Secretary Mattis had said he wanted 3 to 5% growth to afford and pay for that new strategy. This budget is an inflation adjusted from last year's level, so it's growth in that sense, but it is not the 3 to 5% that Jim Mattis said would buy this new defense strategy. In terms of historical terms, relatively speaking, and depending on which metric you look at, defense is pretty steady at half of the discretionary pot. It's declining somewhat as part of overall federal spending, but it's very high in real terms, in terms of real dollar amounts. It's on par with peak budgets in the past, like the Reagan era buildup. So it includes the Pentagon's annual request, which funds all of the troops and all of the civilians and all of their stuff, as well as the additional money that we call for overseas operations. That tends to be Afghanistan, a little bit in Iraq, somewhat Syria, but other places as well, that account. And then it includes a little bit of money typically, for the Department of Energy's nuclear weapons program, which supports the Defense Department directly. Emergency money, in addition to the Pentagon's annual defense-based budget request, really took off after 9/11 with obvious reasons. At the height of the wars, there were over 300,000 troops mobilized in the roughly 2003 to 2010 timeframe, which was the height of the two wars. That money came in addition to the annual spending request for the Defense Department, over and above what they typically get. So it peaked in roughly $180 billion, I think, at the end of the Bush administration, which is also coincides with the peak of both wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Over time, it's steadily declined since then. Under President Obama and Trump, it's been roughly in the $60 to $80 billion range. And it's still for all of these ongoing operations, but really it's for the fixed costs of doing anything anywhere against terrorists and other ongoing activities for the Defense Department. President Trump, in his 2020 request is rumored to be returning to historic levels of overseas operational spending, because he's going to claim he's complying with the budget caps set by the Budget Control Act, and that everything above that should be used in this emergency account. Why does the emergency designation matter, and what's the difference? The difference is emergency means it's debt finance. It's put on the nation's credit card. Congress has not, they do not have the money for it, and they don't intend to find any offsets to pay for it. So the new defense strategy came out last year under Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis. It will continue. It's not going to change under the current acting secretary. And that strategy, in a nutshell, says we're going to pivot somewhat from an emphasis on counterterrorism operations. Doesn't mean we won't do any, but we're going to pivot from an emphasis on counterterrorism operations to focusing on competition, long-term competition with China and Russia. Well, long-term means, by extension, this is a long-term goal. And so within the defense budget, there won't be a lot of money that moves quickly, but yes, we should be able to see some reflection of that shift. There wasn't a lot of it in President Trump's budget last year, however. The Pentagon will admit to that. So I think they were caught a little flat-footed. The strategy came out a little bit later than the budget, so I guess there's a reason for that. But I'll be very curious if we see a bigger noticeable shift in 2020. My hunch is we won't, but that's exactly the question to be asking.